Hi, I'm Carsey.
I'm Derek.
And I'm Sam. And this is Unpacking Homelessness, the podcast where we take a deep dive into the issues surrounding homelessness in our communities. Let's get into it.
Good morning, Charlotte.
Hi, good morning.
How you doing?
Good, yeah. A little better.
Awesome. Good,
A
yeah.
little migraine, so woke up a little. I'm doing good though. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Your background is even more magical than last time. It's like extra cloudy.
It's still the same.
Oh, is it really?
It's beautiful. Well, Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to talk to you more about your experiences and all the things that you've learned through the things that you've been through in your life. As a quick introduction, I just want to introduce this is Charlotte Murphy. She is one of our very, very, very good friends. We're so excited. Would you prefer we go by Charlie? I always call you Charlotte.
Charlie, yeah.
Charlie, yeah, let's do it. Funny. I always call you Charlotte. Charlie is currently in the process of writing her first book. Congratulations. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And establishing her sound healing and retreat business, where she brings together the community with an emphasis on sliding scale and affordability. That's amazing. Yeah. She's passionate about community, writing, reading, drawing, and being with her 2 children and wonderful husband. Her hopes and dreams are to one day have land where her business will flourish and people can come and stay for an extended time to work on healing themselves and being able to rest and reset. She imagines a place where the young and old will be together and families are not so separated. She's a firm believer in carving a path for yourself and believes that if people are given the opportunity to heal, they can begin their life to live their lives fully. It's a beautiful intro.
Well, I really believe in that.
Yeah, that's incredible. Okay, so Charlie, we would love to hear a little bit about your experiences and some of the things that you've gone through and some of the insights that you've gleaned from the life that you've lived.
Sure, yeah. Well, I guess always starting from the beginning is a good place, So I guess my earliest memory would be how kind of it all started was my grandmother on my dad's side, so my dad's mom, had a heart attack. And so my dad went to, I believe it was Maine, somewhere on the East Coast, and he went to visit her. And during this week that he was gone, there was a lot of planning. I was about 5 or 6 years old. And I just remember like there was maps out on the table all the time, and my mom's friend was over. And there was just a lot of discussion about us going to this place called Minnesota that I just didn't know. And I remember being really confused, and we left in the middle of the night. And I think my mom just didn't know what else to do. And she wasn't in a happy marriage, and she just ran away. She's known to do that. We ended up on this farm in Minnesota, and we lived there for, I thought it was a couple weeks. It was actually barely even a week, after talking to my siblings about a couple of these things. And it didn't work out. We ended up getting kicked off that farm, and that kind of trajected us into this place in Minnesota, which was a housing for homeless. So it didn't just happen overnight. It wasn't something, it was all these things leading up to that. And I remember living there, we had to all be separated. So our family couldn't be together. The women, we were with my mom, all the girls, which was at that time was just my sister. And one of the biggest things that I can remember from that happening was we had these really beautiful princess dresses, we called them. And there was a huge garage sale going on. We saw them outside, and my sister and I were just those are ours. You can't get rid of those. That's our stuff. And we were very upset and really sad and scared. And I think it hit us then that oh, we don't get to have things. We're not in a place where we get that anymore. And I think that's when we first really started to realize kind of our situation, and it wasn't fun anymore. And it wasn't some new little adventure. We got to stay in new places, and we really realized how different we kind of were in our situation then. And my mom was pregnant at the time. And so there was just a lot of different things that we had to, we really had to count on the community to be able to even have shelter at that time. And then from there, it was always back and forth between living places, maybe a year or so. And we've lived in so many places like I couldn't even tell you. In my whole entire life that I moved, there's probably over 60 places that I've lived.
Why did you get kicked off of that farm in Minnesota?
Well, one of the reasons is that maybe it was because I threw eggs at a cow because I got dared to. So, but I don't know if that is entirely the truth or not, because I always got blamed for like everything.
Oh.
How young were you at that time?
I was 5 or 6.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
And how many siblings do you have in total?
In total, there's 11 of us. That's including me. Yes.
Okay. And at the
But
time,
at the time, there was 6 of us experiencing this.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we lived in our car for a longevity of time. We lived at a campsite for a whole summer, and we just really depended on my Aunt Maggie. She's not really an aunt, but she's someone who kind of adopted our family. And even then, it was not someone you could fully go to for everything, which it always kind of confused me because she always just gave us money, but then she never gave us the security that we needed. And she regretted that later on. And she saw that, oh, I don't know why we just didn't get you guys a house. And I think she didn't want to enable my mom. I think she really wanted her to help figure it out. And I understand that now. But growing up, it was always a little confusing as to why is she buying us a car and she knows we're homeless. But I really appreciate the fact that she really pushed my mom and didn't enable her in that way. And then going back and forth between different housings. And there was this place, I can't remember if it was in Washington or Oregon, but we stayed there. And it was one of the weirdest situations, I think, because we literally lived behind a couch. Like that's where we slept. We didn't sleep on the couch. We had this whole little area behind a couch that was ours. And I just remember sitting out on this swing one day and just watching the sky and thinking, wow, we really have to depend on all these people. And it felt very caged. And it was really hard to have to depend on people for everything, for food, for shelter, even just staying in the van when we lived in the van, and I would have to go to the bathroom, and I didn't want to wake anybody up, and so I would have accidents, and then I would feel so much shame, and it was a really hard situation to grasp at a young age, that you're just completely in the court of other people, and reliant on other people's kindness. And that doesn't always turn out right either. Because at that homeless shelter that I was just talking about, there was a fridge, and we like went, and I don't remember, I think they were like, oh, just go eat some yogurt or something. We ran in there and we all got like profusely sick. We got food poisoning. We checked the date on it and it was like months old. And so it was just experiencing that kind of sickness when you're not in your own home or safety or anything. It's very life-changing, because at that age, I like swore to myself. I was like, when I grow up, I'm never going to be homeless. I don't care what it looks like. This is never going to happen for me. And I've seen that happen. I don't know if it was the age or what exactly it was, but I just really internalized that, and I didn't want to be there. And I was like, maybe I can be someone that can help other people. and be like that. And so you see how it can kind of alchemize into these ways of, I could do better than this. I could make sure food is ready to eat for people. And yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, looking back, it's funny, right? The relationships that we have with our parents. We think about how we viewed them when we were children. And I remember the moment or maybe not the moment, but the time in my life that I realized that my parents weren't perfect and they didn't know everything and they didn't have it all together. Do you guys remember that? Like,
Just
it was
take it
such
as fact, anything that they say, right?
yeah, you're like, they know what they're doing, like they're grown-ups. And, for people who are growing up in homes that are unstable, right? And situations that are unstable. Um, it's interesting because I'm sure you learned that lesson at a much earlier age. And so to feel like it's not all under control, right? And you're a child, you don't have any control. You don't have a say.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been really, really confusing, I imagine.
Definitely. Yeah, it really was. And just not understanding really why she ran away from my dad so hastily, and still never really understanding that, because to this day she's even said, well, he was the love of my life. And hers just like that. Do you know how horrible that is to like have, we all went through this whole thing, and then for you to just say that so easily? It's so confusing, but people are so hurt and they're so confused, and there's so much pain. And I think there needs to be a lot more understanding of like the mental health behind everything, because I really believe if people had these early interventions, and my mom is in her late 60s, and she grew up during a time where that wasn't like okay at all, and now it's like everyone's doing it, and it's almost over normalized to where it's like people get sick of hearing like people healing from these things. And it seems to be it's either on one spectrum or the other, and there's not this like middle ground of people understanding that we're all just trying to heal here together. And there needs to be more space for vulnerability, and what you guys are doing is really a really cool stepping stone for that, because it allows for this kind of gray area to be seen, where we get numb to a lot of homelessness. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really sad, because that's not how society was ever meant to be. We're not supposed to shove people like under the rug and forget about them.
I know that feeling of like, I'm not going to be like this when I get older, right? And for you, it was, I'm not going to be homeless. Like, I'm not going to put my family through this. And as an adult, when I'm finally in control of myself and my surroundings, this is not how I'm going to do it. But I think we all know too that we can't escape all of it. And I'm curious, like, you were able to escape homelessness as an adult, or avoid homelessness as an adult and get yourself out of that. But what parts of being, having those experiences as a child do you feel like have been much harder to escape?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. Um, I think a lot of it for me was food, like food security and meal prepping, and just having, I have like a reserve of food always. And part of that is just we can have something to give to someone. We have food in the car sometimes if we need to, like, if we're stopped somewhere and want to give that to someone. I think um I think it made me a very empathetic person, to the point of, when I do see this, I don't just try and give people money. I try and think about the situation and what we can do as a collective or as a community. And it feels um, it feels hard, because how do we start that? How do we have all these churches, and how do we have all these places that are emptying for sale? And there's so many places that I feel are potential for families to be able to go to. And but there's a lot of money, and there's so many politics behind it all, and safety for families. And I think it's affected me to where I think I've only been able to control what I can do, and be able to
Mm-hmm.
teach my kids um what they can do. I think as a collective, we need to start in our community.
So you had to rely on people, like you said, and I'm interested if you have any stories on um, a very positive period where you felt like that people were there to help you, and times where it was the opposite, where nobody was there, or you're feeling ignored, or what was that like as a kid?
Yeah, I think one of the situations was that first homeless shelter we stayed at. We had a really nice lady named, I think her name was Erica or Erin. It was Erin. And she was just so involved. And she was, when we ended up moving out of there and getting an apartment, she invited us over and we watched, I remember that movie Hook. And she made slime for us and she had us all spend the night. And I think just to give my mom some space. And
Mhm.
she just did that out of the kindness of her heart. And it was like she was like a friend. It was like having an older sister in that way. And she stepped outside of her role and did something that was out of the norm. And that was just being able to give my mom some of the space that she maybe needed. So that she could process everything that was going on in her life. And I think that was just really cool to be able to do that. I think things like that get taken for granted. You said something about like a negative experience that we had. And the one that like comes to mind is we were stuck at this gas station for like an entire day. And my mom had already filled up because at that time it used to be like I don't know, like someone comes and pumps for you and then you pay, or I don't know. But we had our
Oh,
gas.
you must have been in Oregon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I
Yeah.
remember that part.
Yes.
It's always
So
so
annoying.
awkward.
I
You
hated
pull up
that.
and you're like,
It was always so weird. We were waiting there for a whole day and we couldn't contact my aunt, and then we had to wait for the bank to like transfer money over, and it was just this whole mess of like feeling like, well, what do we do now? And that was the longest we had like been stuck somewhere like in society, with people watching and just feeling like I just remember I was reading my book and being like, I'm just going to ignore this because it was too much, and you can't really feel all those things when you're outside in society, because something I tell my children is that we saw these homeless people fighting in California a couple years ago. And Bear goes, well, why are they yelling at each other? And I reminded him, I'm like, we've had our days of yelling, but we've been inside a home where nobody's seen that. And so I think we forget that that's part of being human too, and we just see the ugliest parts of people, and we forget that we're all human and that we have a safe place to be able to release those emotions.
that's so interesting. Yeah, you're totally right. It's like we all, all families fight. It's just that these people don't have a place to go to keep that part of, their life separate like the rest of us do. You mentioned that you were obviously going through a lot of this when you were young. Did you go to school, or do you remember going to school?
We were homeschooled. So it was all during that time we kind of did our school in the car or at the different homeless shelters that we were at. We lived with my aunt for a few weeks, I believe. But it was just, I don't really remember doing a lot of school during that time. I think I was really just learning about the world, and we didn't really have time to. There's 6 of us, and it was pretty crowded because we had all of our belongings in the car there and a newborn baby. And so it was not really a place for that to happen. And so I remember just reading a lot. And I don't know if we just went to the library and did things like that, but I ended up going to a public school in 8th grade. And then from there on, I kind of got to see how the world was a little bit more put together in that sense, which I really fought for because she didn't really want any of that. And I remember being so terrified and like not having these social skills to the extent of like being comfortable just sitting in the cafeteria by myself. Like that was too much for me. Like, so I wouldn't sat in the bathroom and ate like my food in there because I was terrified. But it was a good lesson, because you learn that that's like all inside your own head, and you have to learn to like really be comfortable with yourself. And I think if we don't have time to process all the things that happen to us, we're just constantly like on this cycle of repeat, because that's how we survive. And once you step out of being in survival, you actually get to show up as yourself. And I didn't get to do that till I was about 24 years old. And that was really strange for me. It was really strange being like reborn into this society of like, oh, I get to choose who I am, and I'm not working 90 hours a week to like do all these things when you actually, and that was when I got to stay home with my son when he was a year old, and I got to breathe for the first time. And I was like, oh wow, this feels really safe.
How did motherhood change you? I mean, I just imagine that process, was so transformative.
Yeah, I think I always felt like a mother to my youngest brother. I was the one that got up with him in the middle of the night and kind of put him back to sleep. And I was 7 years old at that time. And I look at my son who's 7, and I thought I was so grown up. But now I see him and I'm like, there's no way I would have him be rocking a little baby to sleep and having him feed that baby and do those things. So for me, it was really a perspective change of, I didn't get to have a childhood, and I kind of always knew that. But then I really got to have the time to process that and be able to move past that. And for a long time, I thought I was really angry, but I was sad. I was really sad. Sad for my dad, sad for my mom, sad, like just sad for everyone. And I felt like I just had this, I couldn't show that. And I didn't cry for a very, very long time until I met my husband. And he was like one of the first people that helped me like cry again. And I think motherhood really changed me from being in that fight or flight, because I had these opportunities to grow exponentially, and face all of those things that could have potentially taken me all these different circumstances to get to that point. And when you have someone mirroring that for you, you're just in that space to where you can choose to repeat patterns, or you can choose where you go from there. And I remember doing this meditative thing of just letting things go. And so I was up on a mountain. This was a couple years ago, and my daughter was 1 year old, and I had really severe postpartum depression. And I think just everything was coming through at once, which was very overwhelming. But I had a moment to see what I wanted to do. And I was like, I just need to go up to a mountain somewhere. And I did. And I held this ball of snow in my hand, and I just kept playing with it and making it harder and harder till it became like ice. Like it was so hard. And I just held that in my hand, and I just waited till most of it melted away. And it was almost like I was doing that for me internally. And then I just threw it away and I let go. Instead of holding on to all those things, I was able to just really forgive. And I think that's what like unconditional love is. It's being able to not only forgive, but allow people to show up for who they are right then and there. And that's what I did for myself. I allowed myself to show up for me, and for the first time. And that felt, I can't even begin to tell you how good that feels, because I was always just taking care of everyone else and putting everyone else's needs in front of my own. And I never had that nurturing. And so I was able to give that back to myself.
That's so beautiful.
Charlotte, you shared a lot of your experiences with your siblings, but not all of your siblings made it out, if you want to put it that way. What do you think separates you from them? What mindset do you think you had, or what do you think it was about you and maybe some of your other siblings that was different than the siblings who maybe kind of stayed mentally, emotionally, physically trapped in the past.
I think for me, it was learning from other people's mistakes. I didn't have to make them myself. I saw my older sister, who's 12 years older than me. I saw her have children at 8. She had her daughter at 18 years old, and she has been a drug abuser for a very long time. And I knew I never wanted to go down that road. I knew alcohol was a huge factor in our family. And so I just never really did as much as that I feel like the whole family does, not just like my siblings, but everyone else. And I know that that's a huge part of society where we can just numb ourselves in that way. And it's so socially acceptable that like you can go out anywhere. And I've been alcohol free for about 9 months now, like by choice. I just don't see any point in it. But I think age is a huge factor because I was 6, and so I had this understanding of the world, and it was like these formative years, and we're all about 2 years apart. And so I think I really think it was my siblings and having my sister Julia there with me. Her and I were just like always helping each other out, and we held each other accountable in this way of like knowing how much we loved each other, and that there was someone like that was a pillar for you to hold on to during that time. So it's not something, I think if I was just there by myself and I didn't have that emotional support from someone else like that, it wouldn't be the same. And I can kind of see that because my youngest brother, he is about 6 years younger than all of us, or 5. There's a 5-year gap. And so there was people, he was in the home by himself and didn't have siblings to help process this with him. It was kind of his mind against himself versus being able to have people to communicate all these situations with. And so I really think being able to talk and like know that we went through this and it's not just in your head, and having someone to go back and forth about that with is a huge helping point for that.
Going back to your brother, because that's a really interesting, dynamic that's still playing itself out right now. It sounds like
Yes.
He was the baby.
Yes.
He was born into homelessness.
Yes.
And that's really interesting. Can you speak about a little bit about what he's going through and what that's been like for you to watch?
Yeah. So we had an apartment when he was born, and I remember waking up and it was just this note, like I went to the hospital and we're like all just left by ourselves there.
Oh my gosh.
And we're just like, okay. And I remember that being a whole thing. And then when we ended up moving from there, I think we moved back to Colorado. And my brother, he just experienced, I feel like, so many things of like having the security and then having that ripped away. And he was a lot younger than us. And so I had this conversation with him a couple months ago, and I was really trying to have a heart to heart with him. And I was like, I think you're normalizing homelessness because I know you don't want to be this, because he seems very, very lost, and he wants help, but he doesn't want to let go of his ideas about, sorry, it's just very confusing. My son the other day was like, well, why is my uncle homeless? Doesn't he want a home? And I said, well, yes, I'm sure he does, but he says he likes this. And I know he doesn't, because any opportunity he has to spend the night somewhere, he'll stay there for as long as he can. And so I think a lot of it is that mental health and that ego of like, no, I'm choosing to do this. Like, this is a self-righteous thing that I'm doing. And I can respect that to a point of, you don't want to be a part of society because they have shunned you or shown you something else. But hearing it from like my son's perspective, who's 7 years old, and he said, and then my daughter, who's 4, she said, well, he just needs some help. And it was just as easy as that. We just need to learn how to help.
Hmm. What is employment like for him? Has he been able to hold down a job much, or?
No, so that's like a huge part of like the mental health that like all kind of started with this. And he didn't want to be a part of the world where he felt like there was so much wrong going on. He didn't want to be a part of paying rent to people that was going to these bad corporations, and that it was very like high up, like conspiracy theory kind of things almost. But also I think there's also the other side of it is that, well, we are paying money as a society to clean up after homelessness. And there's this other side of it that you have to take responsibility and realize that that's not the better choice because you don't want to work for a bad corporation or it was just always very confusing, and he always had an answer for something. Um, and I think he got very defensive. And I read this article that said like there's only about 1% of people that are born into homelessness. It's a very, very small percentage. And I was trying to show him how difficult that must be because I was like, I don't know what that's like. I was a lot older and I don't know how things affected you. And I want the best for him. I want him to be able to get the help that he needs. And he has seizures and he won't take the medication. And there needs to be something that happens in our society that allows people to get help outside of that, like an early intervention or something that happens where we have to be able to stop these things happening.
I can only imagine the family of 6 at the time,
Mm-hmm.
all that would go along between having to mobilize and
Yes. And with
yeah,
that many, there's not really room for you take up a lot of space for other people,
right.
or you do get to see that perspective. And I think I do remember this family moving in to that first homeless shelter, and this woman was helping me learn how to read. Um, and I think you can kind of see we were settled in there a little bit more. And then this new family came in and it was like, oh, the pressure's kind of like off of us now. Like there's this other people. And so it does feel it's kind of the same thing that happens in society where it's like you go into school and there's a new kid there. And it's just, we do that thing where we focus on the new thing. And so, you're at the mercy of other people, and we don't know how other people are always going to react to that. And it's scary because everyone's processing their own homelessness separate but together. And so I think you, my perspective is that you show up almost like with this mask on, like, oh, this is normal. This is us. This is our family. And you don't get to show up and be raw and be vulnerable and be like, I never saw my mom like break down and crying, which is sad to me because you're in this space where we all know what's going on, we all know what's happening, but then there's still this like kind of mask that happens of like this is just the stepping point for you to get onto the next thing. But it's, why don't we ever have that place where we can just like break down and be vulnerable and be able to just be like, yes, this is hard, I need help, and be able to cry about that. I think that would be way more healing and helpful than just trying to keep surviving.
That's so interesting because, like, as a parent, right, you think that you being strong and non reactive to these situations. I mean, I keep putting myself in your mom's position, like having that many children, being pregnant, going to this place that you were hoping was going to work out that seemed like a better option. It's probably why she made that choice, right?
Yeah.
That didn't work out. Then going to another situation. It's so, I think, relevant for you to say, like, what really would have been helpful in those moments was to see her cry, was to
Mm-hmm.
see her validate that this is hard and this is not normal,
Yeah.
and that we're struggling right now and that's okay. That's just really interesting. I feel like our family did very similar things. It was just be strong, be strong, be strong. And, I think that word gets thrown around a lot, but it's sort of like gaslighting when you're a child to be
Yeah.
like, this isn't normal, right? Like, am I nuts?
Yes.
This is crazy.
did you have a sense that, I don't want to say the government, but it is like institutions, like were aware of your family's situation, and that, like I remember when I was growing up, sometimes it was made aware that if anybody outside of our family knew what was going on within our home, that being taken away from our parents was an option. Like that could be an outcome. And so that kind of made us want to protect what was going on in our home even more.
Yes,
Did you have that sense?
we did. And so Child Protective Services was called on our family a couple times. And it was scary because my mom would talk to us before, and like if we said anything, then it would be our fault that the family was getting taken away and separated
Jeez,
from
it's
each other.
heavy.
And so we would be in there, and the lady knew, like we were just like, we're fine, like it's okay. And she knew. And my sister and I actually recently talked about that and how bizarre that is, but they can't force you to say anything, and they have to go off of what is said. And which is also, I don't know. I don't think that would have been the best thing either, because we would have been placed somewhere else and we wouldn't have had each other as those pillars to lean on. And we all probably would have I don't know what would have happened. We all would have gone down this other road. So
And
I can't say that would be better.
yeah, you would have, I imagine, lived with the perceived guilt that this was your fault.
Yes.
And I imagine that would be just detrimental.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
think you can come back from things like that. I don't. Yeah. And so it's better to just, was better for us to not say anything, we felt like, but also there is that like anger that we felt of like, well, why does it have to be like this, and why wasn't she given more help? And I think it comes down to um we all make choices, and we have to be accountable for those choices. And I think if maybe my mom felt a lot of guilt, I really don't know. I can just say from my perspective of what I would feel like having children go through that. Like I wouldn't be able to not give them the resources and things that we need. And it is very strange because things were so different back then. And I know we were on food stamps and we had all these things, and I don't really understand how that works now because I've been on that as an adult, and you have to have like a residence to put down. And so there is a lot of little flaws in the system there that can be challenging for people. But then as I started to get over those challenges for myself, so I could see if I could help my brother out, there's caseworkers that you can get, and they'll be the ones to help get you the food stamps. And so you don't have to have all these like this foundation to be able to get the help that you need anymore. And there is a lot of other resources. Like I know a lot of people don't know, but you can do bond Medicaid with Kaiser. And that's a place where they have everything in house there. And I grew up where you just always had to go to all these other places. And that was really hard to get to on the buses. And just if you're working, you don't have like a lot of time. Sometimes those bus rides, they don't show up, or so it's nice to know that there are things changing within within those systems, and that Medicaid is getting more accepted throughout our healthcare services.
You had every reason to have a negative view on the world, and you're just this wonderful, uplifting person. And thanks for the great imagery you had of the snowball. That was great. But I guess, what would you say to someone that's feeling stuck and maybe a little hopeless?
Yeah, I think that you're allowed to feel hopeless. You're allowed to spiral down, but you need to know when that's not serving you anymore. You have to plant yourself. So if you're spiraling down, just imagine yourself as this seed, and that that purpose has something, so that seed can be planted and you can ground yourself, because we are victims of circumstance, and we can choose how we want that outcome to be. So if we have that time to like think about our life and think about the most beautiful thing that you want, hold on to that, because that's what's going to help you survive, not only survive, but that's what's going to help you get to from point A to point Z. You're going to be able to do all these things in your life that you didn't think you were ever going to be able to do. And it's you're powerful. You have that choice to be able to show up how you want to in this world. And I really do believe it's that human connection, which is why I emphasize that a lot, is being able, I think it all starts with conversation and humanizing people, and being able to just have that conversation with someone and let someone know your vulnerability and your dreams, and you hold on. I really do believe if you hold on to that, that is like a little seed that will eventually keep growing if you keep watering that.
The fact is like people do enter adulthood without that transformation. People do go right into adulthood carrying all the baggage that they grew up with and feeling just as under the thumb of the system as they did growing up. Like, what do you think we can do to help give people that kind of self-empowerment?
That's such a good question. I think it would start with people understanding their circumstances, and being able to just talk about it. Because if you don't talk about it, then nothing is going to change. And so it comes from, I think it has to come from within to start that change without. I think it is based on like how each person is. And some people are just blatantly not going to want help at all. And it comes down to the level of them having to go within themselves and seek that change. I really do believe if there's people or communities around there knowing that, hey, when that time comes, you have this place to go to, you have, but that needs to be a conversation. I think that starts, because people can't do this alone. You weren't ever meant to do this alone. And so I think if you're getting preached to all the time, you're going to kind of shut off, like you're going to disassociate and just kind of be there. And I don't want that for people. I want people to be engaged in the conversation.
Yeah, well, even just acknowledging that it all starts with being a safe place for people where they don't feel judged and they don't feel shame, right? Because those are they're sort of the building blocks, especially when you're a child going through these things. I mean, shame is such a deep emotion that is stored in our bones. And so if we can at a younger and younger age help dismantle the systems of shame, and say, this has happened to you, not
Mm-hmm.
because of you. And this doesn't define you. It's
Yes.
something that will make you stronger. And I think the earlier kids can hear that message, the more equipped they'll be to be empowered to make changes from that place that you speak of, that place that's out of
Yeah.
fight or flight.
Yeah. That actually really reminds me of this thing that happened, I think in ninth grade or 10th grade. But it was called Challenge Day. And it's this, not, I think it's a nonprofit, and they go to different schools, and you get the whole school day, and you're in the gym, and you're doing these insane, like walk over this line if you've ever faced homelessness. And they are like bridging or putting a bridge for that huge gap of that conversation. And I remember being across the line for almost every single thing that he said. And it was so intense. And then sometimes I was the only one over there that crossed the line. But then all my peers got to witness that. And for that vulnerability to happen, and for people to see me and be like, wow, I didn't know that. Like, you're always wearing like my sister would donate like all these old clothes to us, and like it was always name brand like Hollister, and so I got like that I was like a preppy emo, or like labels. And it was just like people assumed that like my life was completely different because of the clothes that I wore, it's so interesting that we just assume things all the time. So I think being able to have something even like that where it feels safe to like come across this line if this has ever happened to you, and then you get to see that you're not the only one for most of the time and all that too. But then if you are the only one and someone else is witnessing that, then it relieves that pain of like, oh, you see me. And I think when you feel seen, you stop hiding.
Wow, that seems amazing on both sides. For the child experiencing hardship, they get to be seen. And for the other children witnessing um, that their peer is going through something and building that empathy at such a young age, that's really beautiful. I think that building that empathy at a young age would help conversation. It seems like a theme is we need a social life. Like we're not meant to be alone. We do need people around us. We do need to be able to talk about these things, to break down the walls of shame and pride. Because ironically, one thing that we're finding that does come out of homelessness is an over sense of pride. It's like no one's going to be there for me but me. So I'm
Yes.
not. So like it's me here for myself, and that's a hard barrier to break down with people. And I think building that empathy at a young age and creating that conversation is just like a little piece of a solution, to helping the children going through it learn how to discuss it
Yes.
sooner
Yes.
than later. Yeah. That's a really neat program. That was called Challenge Day.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
Very
It makes
cool.
me think of how Japan does their school lunches. So they don't have any janitors and they don't have any cooks. They cook together, they clean up together, and so there's just this sense of community and accountability, and nobody looking down on a janitor or anything like that. It seems like it's a
Yeah.
great move to do it at a young age.
Yeah, I really do believe that, because like that's exactly how my kids view that. And then it's that innocence of, they're like, well, why doesn't he just get help? Why won't he accept help? And I think if we really listen, if we're in that situation, you're like, why won't I get help? And what is the real answer that comes up for that? If it's pride, if it's just,
Distrust.
yeah, exactly. Then how do you go from there? I think it is, you have to be able to shed those like sticky layers that have been adding up for so long. And at some point you do have to become vulnerable again to be able to have that change happen.
So Carsey was mentioning that you lead sound baths now, and those are so therapeutic. And I could only imagine leading one. How's that been for you, and how does that affect you and the people that you're
Yeah.
leading?
Yeah. So it kind of started with me working at this bathhouse and doing body scrubs, and something so simple as washing another human's body, and the amount of joy that is received on both ends, because someone's like, wow. I remember this woman told me, the only time that I would ever think this is when you're a baby or after you die. And it's like, why do we have these experiences that are so wonderful, but we don't allow ourselves to have them between. And so for me, it was, I wanted people to be able to feel this deep relaxation. And I know that in an ideal world, we would all be able to have like these things. So with everyone working all the time, and it's like, what does that time limit look like, and what's the most that we can do with our time? And the studies that I've read have shown like the 55 minutes to an hour or more of that sound bath, and how sound can be so healing and relaxing. And being able to facilitate that is empowering for me, because I can give this thing to people that not only do I reciprocate from, but they also get this deep sense of, wow, like I feel rested, and it wasn't even like I was there for 7 hours, and that feels really cool. It's awesome, because you get both ends of it all. Because I recently had a surgery, and I decided not to take any medicine, and I was just going to play the sound baths to see how that would work, and how sound will actually help resonate and heal from within. And I didn't feel any pain for the hour that I played, and then for 4 hours afterwards, I wasn't in any pain. It was insane. And so I did that as a testament to see, like, okay, what am I actually doing? Is this actually going to help? Like, and I think for myself, if I'm going to be doing something, I want to know that it works for me on this level. And so that's just always been really meaningful to me, is to be able to do something that not only helps me, but it helps the people around me on a huge level. And so I like doing the sound baths in a huge community for a lot of people, because I think, again, it's that conversation afterwards of people being able to talk about that experience, and it resonates. And I think that's what can build off of that. And it's
So
just something so simple.
the last one that I did, I can fall asleep anywhere,
Mhm.
and I've got a snoring problem. So it's happened at regular meditations, sound meditations, like those. I'm gonna fall asleep in 2 seconds, and so I was that disruptor of like, got too comfortable, snored, and kind of made it worse for everybody else. And like,
Lots of healing going on over
Yes,
here with this guy.
at least I'm
So
feeling
maybe
healed.
you would be good with a one-on-one.
That's awesome.
That's fun.
Do you want to mention the name of your retreat if anybody wants to look it up or participate in that?
Yeah. Well, right now my sister and I are kind of working on co-collaborating a lot of things, and so those retreats, we're not sure what those are going to look like, because this is like a newborn baby kind of thing.
So exciting.
Yeah, but I have like Wild Fox Medicine on Instagram, and I have a facility of a friend's house that we both operate out of, kind of close to the Colorado Mills. And again, I do like the sliding scale with that too. And if someone just needs to come and just needs something and doesn't have money, like that's kind of, I think that's why people show up as healers. It's not for money. It's to be able to have that connection, be able to see someone experience something good and be able to pass that on. Because I really believe in like that, paying it forward in that way, you know? So it feels weird to like offer business in that way, because I'm like, I don't know what that really looks like yet, you know?
Yeah, but people can follow you and watch the evolution of what this turns into. And you're such an incredible example of what it can look like to be, born into a situation that you have no control over, right? One that could really rock you, and to take that pain and that trauma, really, let's
Yeah.
call it what it is, and turn it into something that is so powerful and so compassionate and beautiful and effective, and just resonates really with everybody. So thank you for doing all the work that you do. It's making a difference. And it's funny when I think about like the people that are going to make the most change in these ways, right, are people that have been through pain, because you've touched that, you've felt it, you know what that's like. And
Yeah.
that sort of empathy, it's not something that can be learned.
Yeah.
It's something you have to experience. So thank you for being such a beautiful example of what that can look like.
Thanks for saying that.
All right, Charlotte, well, this has been an incredible interview. We've learned so many things, and thank you for just inspiring everybody and reminding us that compassion and empathy and self-healing, taking that time to really understand you and where you've come from, and seeing your pain as something that can be used for good. It's such a beautiful message.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me and creating this experience so that I can be able to tell my stories. I don't think I would have normally ever said yes to a podcast thing like this, and stepping outside of yourself and being able to do something like that is hard to do. And I think what you guys are doing is really cool. And I can't wait to see all the other conversations that come up and the change that happens from this.
Thank you.
That means
Sure.
a lot.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Charlie, we'll have an awesome day. Thank you so much again for being on, and we will talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, let's unpack that.
Well, that was an interesting conversation with Charlotte. It's really interesting to hear the perspective of a child, an adult now who was a child experiencing homelessness, and who's now a mother, having to kind of, I imagine, break free from a lot of those narratives and lenses to develop a whole new type of dynamic with her own children and to not repeat dynamics. It's really great when we have good examples of adults and we say, oh, I'm going to do that. And then we take that dynamic and we kind of translate it onto, the next generation. But when we don't have that, we're left to kind of building it ourselves. And it can, I imagine, feel kind of like a guessing game at times. So I really commend her for being the parent she is.
But it's so wonderful that she has a partner, Charlie, who supports her and has helped her heal. And I think that's really a beautiful, it's a beautiful sign that you can still find people that can help you along these journeys if you're open to it.
I imagine if you're open to it and you're able to not project your anger and fear and insecurity onto them, right?
Yeah.
A lot of like like willpower, really, to say, no, I'm not gonna have a relationship. Like, I'm not gonna relive this experience with this person. I'm gonna have like an organic experience with this person and create it myself.
And having a partner that knows that when you slip into these habits, right? When you slip into these like triggers, holds space for you and goes, well, I know your past and I know that you're working through this. So, I'm still here.
Yeah.
Because security is, as a child, especially, like feeling like the people around you aren't making decisions that make sense to you, and having your setting change all the time, having food be something you can't depend on, having, learning be something you can't depend, just no semblance of like monotony of things that are reliable.
So the dependable food. So her point on getting really sick from giveaway food that was months expired. I've been the first to kind of complain about how stupid it is that we're not allowed to, how big organizations can't bulk donate food oftentimes, and that's the exact reason why. If like if as long as there's screening processes in there, but if you're just gonna, what worse situation to get super sick in than when you're homeless? She was like, what, 6 years old at the time?
Yeah. One thing that really resonated with me was when she was talking about her bond with her sister and how that she feels that kept her somewhat grounded. Yeah, that's really powerful, and how her brother maybe didn't have that is so sad. And a lot of the conversations that we've been having just are really bringing my attention back to how important social structures are and how that really is like a key need in such a real way. And when we feel alone and we're left to our own devices, how that can kind of calcify into adulthood, and where you're not going to let anyone in, where it doesn't matter how much help is offered to you. You're like, no, if you don't trust the system, like what she was saying about her brother, I really related to this. I feel like I've had to do a lot of work to break free from a lot of these mindsets. And when she was talking about her brother, I was like, I really empathize with her brother. Well, I think when you have empathy for your parent or guardian who created the circumstance that now you're having to fight your way out of, but you actually have empathy for them and you don't want to blame them directly, then what do you blame? You blame the system that they were a part of that put them in that situation. So him coming out into adulthood being like, kind of like, I don't want to be a part of this system. I don't even want to contribute to it. I don't even want to work for it. It's like, yeah, I get that because I think his way of protecting his mom is to blame the thing that's bigger than her. And unfortunately, that's the thing that we kind of need to be a part of in order to have things like shelter, which kind of goes back to the conversation of like, what is a right and what needs to be earned. Like, we need to participate in society and get a job and have these things in order to have shelter and food. Like, yes, we do.
Yeah.
But
so I think I'm kind of in the minority on my opinion on it. Of course, it would be great to have government intervention in places that look after society, but I feel like it's been way more empowering for me to look at it as, don't expect that. That's why we all need to be in this together, and why we should help people that are less fortunate, and why a lot of churches are doing a lot of good because
Yeah.
they're big organizations that can make a change. But yeah, I know she was young, so she wouldn't expect her to remember a bunch of stories. But I'm always very curious of homeless people. On some people make gobs of money panhandling of like the gypsies, for instance, where they have jobs and they collect a lot of money. And I was curious from her standpoint, but I know she was pretty young.
Yeah, well, she like I absolutely meant every word that I said. She is such an incredible person, and I recently introduced her to a different friend, and I was telling the friend about Charlie, and I had said like you'll see, you'll meet her, and she is just a walking angel. She just glows this love and this compassion that you can tell comes from such a deep and um meaningful place. And she just lives her life in a way that is so inspiring to me. She's such an incredible friend. I mean, a lot of the things that she said, I didn't want to interject, but there have been, I can count how many times she has just held me in space where I've just been a mess. I've just needed to cry. And she's just such a beautiful person to sit there and just let you know, like, you're good. You're good. And I'm so grateful that she's been able to take the pain that she's had and turn it into something that's really so beautiful and so intentional. And I hope it helps other people realize that they can do the same thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Sam and I are going to one of their retreats at the end of March, and we're really excited about it. So we'll do a little bit of our own healing, and I've never done a sound bath, so I'm actually really excited to see what that's like. I've heard really good things.
It made me
You'll love it.
wonder when we were talking to her. I've done a few sound baths. It makes me wonder when we're talking to her, like, is there a space for people to go to? Like, what would that look like for there to be a space open to the public, and kind of really aimed toward people who actually have dealt with trauma, like, and are maybe like still very much struggling with it. To have like that kind of therapy. Not like, I know that we have resources for people, like you can come here and you can get food and you can get a blanket and baby shelter for a night, whatever
shower
might look like, a shower. And that's great. And those are definitely also basic needs that need to be met. And those, not to take away from that, but like, is there also a space for like that type of healing, like mental health healing, not in a person to person way, but in a like, this is a space where we're going to put on a sound bath and we're going to have these therapies that you get to apply to yourself. I don't know, maybe if there was a space that was like, no, it's just a sauna.
Yeah, you're opening
You're
the
just
door
sitting in a sauna
for healing at your own pace with no real oversight and no judgment. And that just sort of gets you used to what it might feel like to feel the things.
and to take care of yourself. Saunas, red light therapies, sound baths. These are things that we're doing for ourselves, with ourselves. That's a very personal therapy. Learning how to breathe through those things, learning how to calm our thoughts,
Yeah, there's Seattle definitely has some, not sound baths, but did one in Seattle and did one in San Francisco where it's open to the public, it's free, it was meditation, it wasn't sound bath, but there's a lot of those out there. And once we have a website, I would love to kind of get a running theme of here's what's out there, because I think knowledge is power, and if you don't know that they exist, how are you going to access them, right?
I would love to talk to somebody who's doing something like that and see how it's going. Yeah,
it'll be cool when we as a society at some point can really acknowledge that spiritual healing is part of all of this, right? I mean, we acknowledge, I think, pretty easily that religion helps get people out of these situations. We've been in contact with a few people that have had that experience. And so, but there's a lot of people where the idea of religion is very off-putting to them for whatever reason. And so just broadening that to spirituality could be really helpful.
The one in San Francisco was, I loved it so much. So it was chanting. They had monks, And what I loved the most was this was hundreds of people, all, you're not just sitting in benches. It's sprawled out in every corner, hundreds of people, and everybody dead quiet. Everybody was so respectful of, like, how people are in public. It's people making fart noises and jokes and and dead quiet. Everybody just healing together is what it felt like. It was wonderful.
That is so powerful.
That's cool. Maybe we could work with Charlotte someday on putting together something like that.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. If anyone was gonna implement something like that, it'd be her. So
Oh, she'd be amazing at that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Unpacking Homelessness. This episode was produced and edited by us. Our theme song is by Eric Lawson. You can find more of his music at soundcloud.com/eelaws. If you or someone you know would like to contribute to our show, get in touch with us at unpackinghomelessness@gmail.com. Until next time.